Welcome to our presentation on riding the reunification rollercoaster. So I'm Mandy Matthewson and I am a director of the Eeny, Meeny, Miney Foundation, and I also work at the University of Tasmania, and I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice.
And I am Amanda Sillars. I'm the founder and CEO of the Eeny, Meeny, Miney Foundation. I'm currently a psychological science student at Griffith University. And I have lived experience as a child of alienation and as a parent of alienation, as well as a parent of reunification.
So in this presentation, we will include information from lived experience, from clinical practice experience, and also we'll be providing some of the results of a research study that was conducted and recently published in Frontiers in Psychology. And we'll also include some practical advice on how to ride the reunification roller coaster. So the research study we conducted at the University of Tasmania, as I said, was published in Frontiers in Psychology. It explored the experiences of voluntary reunification after a period of parental alienation. In the study, we interviewed 9 adult alienated children and 12 targeted parents. They engaged in semi-structured interviews that were then transcribed, and then we analysed the information that they provided in the interviews thematically. And this is the first study that explores reunification from the perspective of both adult alienated children and targeted parents. So before we talk about the research, I thought we might briefly mention the difference between qualitative research and quantitative research, and also mention some of the challenges that you have conducting research in this area. So with qualitative research, it's really about exploring the context and complexities of a particular phenomenon. In this instance, it's around reunification after parental alienation. So it really looks at an in-depth exploration of information that people provide through interviews. Can also be through information provided in other methods, such as observations or in focus groups. But for this study, we interviewed participants. It also looks at getting rich descriptive narratives, having a look at those narratives and interpreting the underlying meanings of those narratives. And we use data analysis techniques such as coding and thematic analysis. So qualitative research is really looking at analysing people's words, whereas quantitative research is looking at numerical data. So people might complete surveys or experiments and provide us with various numbers where we, quantify information, and then we analyse that descriptively. We don't look at the meaning behind the data, we just look at the numerical data and analyse that. So if we want to know more about someone's experience of reunification, then a qualitative approach is probably the best match for that.
And also picking up on themes, new themes, that haven't been collected before in the data or in research. That's really
Exactly. The other important thing to remember with qualitative research is because we're looking at such rich data from the words that people, tell us in their stories, ordinarily the sample sizes are smaller than we see in quantitative research. So for quantitative research to have, more power, and we can rely more on the outcomes, sample sizes need to be quite large. Whereas with qualitative research, we're just looking to see, do we have enough information from our participants to have reached data saturation? So data saturation is where we're hearing the same themes and the same information from the participants after we reach a certain number. It's also quite difficult to find participants to engage in research about parental alienation, particularly adults who have been alienated from a parent during childhood, because research has shown that it is a traumatic experience. And so it can be quite confronting to then be asked to tell your story to strangers who are conducting research. So it can be difficult getting participants for this research.
And I mentioned also the part that the alienated children also play in the alienation and the guilt that they carry, you know, wanting to share their experience is can be quite embarrassing and challenging. And also if they're still trying to make sense of it all, you know, because there's a lot of people, you know, don't necessarily know that they've actually experienced alienation until somebody says, yeah, from a therapist or a friend, you know, mentions to them that they've actually experienced alienation, and then they go and look it up and see the dynamics, and then they start understanding, unpacking it. It's one of those things. And also the lack of trust that alienated children have for the targeted parent and also other people is a big challenge with recruiting alienated children. I think the other thing I was going to mention was the hyperprotective of the other parent still after reunification. That's yeah, I can speak on experience that I've you know, seen that for myself, and I've seen it with a lot of other parents who have reunified with their children, you know, just when they think that everything's fine and they start talking about the other parent, all of a sudden the child withdraws because they become very protective of the other parent.
So essentially we're asking people to tell stories that are very difficult, and sometimes the story to tell is too difficult, and so people choose not to participate in the research, which is understandable. So in terms of our findings in this research, when we look at the adult alienated child experience of reunification, they spoke about a catalyst for the reunification. So for some people, the catalyst was their own personal experience of divorce or being alienated from their own children, and then understanding their experience as a child through the lens of their experience as an adult and realizing what is happening to my children now happened to me. Then they go on to find information about parental alienation, and then they want answers or information, and so they seek out the parent they were alienated from. Another catalyst event was illness or death of a family member, which then either brought about contact with the targeted parent through, you know, making contact with each other at the funeral, or it then brought about reconnecting with family members that the adult alienated child had been alienated from as well. But the really key catalyst for adult alienated children was their readiness to make contact with a targeted parent. So until they're ready, reunification isn't possible, is essentially what our research was finding. So then when we looked further into the experience of reunification, we discovered factors that influence reunification. One of the factors was alienating parents. That's because alienating parents don't tend to stop using parental alienating behaviours, and that can continue well into the child's adulthood. And also just that bond that the child has with the alienating parent, that doesn't go away, and that, you know, the enmeshed relationship that can be formed there can also get in the way of reunifying with the other parent. Then there are other family members and friends. They can also influence reunification. They can influence it positively by, you know, encouraging supportive family networks, or they can also influence it negatively by giving advice that hampers the alienation or family members that, I guess, use parental alienating behaviours themselves might also prevent reunification from occurring. And then physical distance is also difficult. So if you have the alienated child and the targeted parent living in different states or in different countries, it can then make it harder for them to reconnect and make the contact that's needed for reunification.
I'll also add in on the physical distance, as if you have the parent, are living too close to each other, it makes it difficult to secretly go and meet, or yes, seeing them out at the local shopping centre or things like that. It makes it even harder. It's sort of it's kind of both way. It goes both ways, really, doesn't it, Mandy?
It does. Yeah, it does. So sometimes physical distance can make it hard to connect, but also being too close might make it hard to connect in a way that is free of the influence of the alienating parent.
Or feel like they're being watched. It's a constant feeling that you usually hear from some of the kids. It's even though that parent is not necessarily present, it's still that feeling that they're going to be seen by somebody else and someone's going to report it back to the alienating parent.
Exactly. So the other thing that we found in the research was that parental alienation can also impact on the adult alienated child's relationships. So there is that when the children are reunifying, it can be difficult for some children to build that connection between themselves and the targeted parent. So for some of them, that connection happens quite easily once they start having regular contact. But for other children, it's actually quite complicated and really difficult. And it seems that perhaps that is to do with the length of the alienation. So if the child never actually had the opportunity to form a close attachment bond with the targeted parent before they were alienated from them, it makes it really hard to then build a bond with that parent after alienation. Also, the trauma reactions that the children have, and also the trauma reactions of the targeted parent. So if both are quite traumatized and reactive, then it can make it really hard for them to have the calm and compassionate conversations that they need to have to build a bond again. I don't know, Amanda, if you wanted to talk more about that.
Yeah, I was going to mention, the unhelpful thinking traps, like the cognitive distortions that the child, can end up, taking on these learned behaviors or learned ways of thinking. It's like these polarized views of everything, and catastrophizing things, like something might be so small, but yet in the child's mind, it's been blown up to a stage where they just can't, it's unrealistic. There's also, personalizing everything. You find that everything that the targeted parent wants to talk about sort of gets shifted as if it's a kind of an attack on them all the time, or on the alienating parent, and so they can be quite reactive. It is quite challenging. I think that's a big one that does play a part in that reunification process, is the child's new way of thinking is really unhelpful.
Absolutely. And I think also when we consider being exposed to parental alienating behaviours as an experience of trauma, then often that child is quite hypervigilant, and they've needed to be to survive in the household of that alienating parent. But it means that they can be on high alert around others and the targeted parent. And so even just a change in a targeted parent's way of breathing can make the child feel anxious or feel like there's some sort of threat, even if there isn't. And so I guess adult alienated children can feel quite threat sensitive. It's also important to remember that often targeted parents have been through very traumatic experiences themselves, through the circumstances that led to the breakup of the relationship with the alienating parent, the custody dispute that might have occurred, and then all of the things that happen in the family law court. So targeted parents too might be quite hypervigilant, might be quite reactive.
And oversharing is the big one that I see, because they've been misrepresented. They feel that they want to share their version, and sometimes they'll tend to overshare, and there's sort of no, I notice, especially online, there's like no full stops. It's just like this never-ending sentences, and you can see when people are really traumatized is that they feel that they really have to explain themselves, that they did have a good relationship and those sort of things. So it can be hard to approach a parent when they're like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, when targeted parents want to give their side of the story, it's just too overwhelming for the adult alienated child to hear. The other important thing we found that affects alienation is the child's ability to trust others, and also their ability to trust themselves and their own opinions and judgment. And so that too can impact on building the relationship with the targeted parent.
Lack of critical thinking skills is majorly affected.
Absolutely. And I think really importantly for the child, reunification requires time and effort, because if you want to build an attachment bond with another person, you need to have a relationship that's continuous. So there needs to be regular contact. It needs to be a warm and welcoming relationship. And it also needs to have some level of closeness. And it takes time to build that. And if trust or lack of trust is in the way, if your own trauma reactions are in the way, it can be really hard to build those attachment bonds.
It's really difficult also when you've got a parent that's hovering over them all the time, constantly watching them, and we see the things like a full blackout of social media, like they've blocked every person to do with the targeted parent, and there's only this one kind of worldview, and this parent's just hanging over them, just doesn't want them to, work things out. I mean, that's a huge challenge. Not getting any other insight into, seeing that parent's spending time with other people that they've always been there, friends and family, and that they're not this ogre, because they seem to have, they do have all these friends around them still, and they still have other family members around them. So you can see why the alienating parent goes to their utmost to make sure that child does not see that parent in any way, whether it's social media or social events or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And we also found that the influence of the alienating parent also continues after the alienating parent has passed away, because the messages that the alienating parent drives home to the child, they don't just go away or disappear. They are still influencing the adult alienated child's thoughts. And so there can be this level of, if I make connection with my other parent, even though the alienating parent has now passed away, am I somehow rejecting that parent who's now died? So all of those thoughts are still with the child.
I guess when you think about what happens in cults is the indoctrination, it's these repetitive things that have been said to you that, you start to believe them, especially if you're not getting other perspectives.
Absolutely. And it's hard to unravel. It's hard to unravel those repeated messages that you get from someone that you might love. So here's a complicated diagram. So this was actually a really important part of the study that we found, the role of communication in reunification. And so if either the child or the targeted parent has difficulty with communication, then it's really going to impact on that experience. So if we look at the types of communication that hinder reunification, one of the big ones was confrontational communication. And so that's when the targeted parent wants to have a conversation around, here are all the things that happened to me, and let me tell you all the negative things I can think of about your other parent. And then pretty quickly, the targeted parent sounds a lot like the alienating parent, and the child just does not want to participate in that. Also, when the targeted parent is past focused and wants to go over past events, wants to talk about what did or didn't happen at the time of separation, what didn't happen in the custody dispute, that is too overwhelming for the child, and they will retreat. Also, if either the parent or the child is quite reactive, that can then get in the way of their ability to have calm conversations. So communication that seems like a battleground, and at any minute a bomb's going to go off, and at any minute someone's physiological reaction is going to jump up, that will get in the way of the conversation. And also being avoidant. So for the child, if they don't want to go near conversations, or if the targeted parent is tiptoeing around way too much, then you don't have that continuous communication. But it's also important to remember that sometimes a child has to be avoidant in order to protect themselves from either really difficult traumatic experiences for them, or from the prying eyes and the influence of the alienating parent. Did you want to add more to that, Amanda?
Yeah, I was also going to say, with going back to the past focus, is alienated children are often so worded up about court and financials and things like that they'll can sometimes keep bringing it up, and it makes it really difficult, because then you obviously have that confrontation of, the child bringing up past things, the other parent, or they both may want to speak about the past, and it's obviously going to bring up a lot of difficult feelings, and it's not constructive in rekindling the relationship to be past focused, whether it's parent or child. And obviously the reactive side of things is both. The reactive could come from being hyperprotective, talking about things about the alienating parent or things that they might have done. It's so important to understand all these sides of things, from a child's perspective, because really at the end of the day, when you think about it, like, what really matters is that you want the pain to go away and that you want to move forward, but you need to create that place, to be able to move forward. And it's not about disregarding everything completely, because it's all, I guess, part of the experience of being alienated. It's traumatic, it's destructive, but in the beginning, it's not the best place to start, if you're wanting to move forward.
And I think, as the quote on the side of the slide says, once you start getting into difficult territory that's emotionally charged, everyone just shuts down. That's what they've learnt to do through the alienation process. And then once you're in that mode, it's very hard to then have, build a secure base with each other and build trust.
And some children will withdraw for years, and sometimes they will withdraw completely, not come back again,
Mm-hmm. And that's certainly something that we found. There is this sort of approach withdrawal cycle. So it's almost like the child will approach just to sort of test the waters, and then when it gets a bit too much, they'll retreat, and they can retreat for years before they reach out again. And so therefore the reunification roller coaster, there's that hope and excitement that they've made contact, and then some parents will latch onto that contact and overwhelm the child. Then the child will withdraw again, and then you just go through this ongoing approach withdrawal cycle until the child realizes that the parent can provide a safe, calm place for them. And so to do that, we found that there are types of communication that facilitate reunification for the child. And the key is compassion. So compassionate and calm communication where the parent understands the perspective of the child.
Like I hear you and I see you, because it's such a lonely journey. Being an alienated child, you don't feel understood. You don't have nobody ever asks you how you feel. There's a lot of neglect of or many different facets of neglect this falls into.
And even to answer the question, how do you feel? It's a foreign language to many alienated children. So it then takes time for that child to then learn how to have that conversation with their other parent. And that just takes time and that takes compassion.
Yeah, and differentiating between your alienating parents' thoughts and feelings and your own, that's challenging in itself.
Absolutely.
The independent thinker phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah. So to be able to do this, the targeted parent needs to be objective. And so that's stepping outside of their own experience, stepping outside of their trauma in order to provide the secure base and that compassionate relationship with the child. And also persistent communication, as I mentioned earlier, to build a secure base between two people. That relationship needs to be continuous, needs to be warm and inviting. It needs to be persistent, but not in a way that is overwhelming to the child, and not in a way that's going to then, I guess, bring about the use of more alienating behaviours from the other parent. And finding that right balance can be hard and can be a bit of trial and error.
Something that just jumped into my mind was like, we talk about the approach and withdraw. It's sometimes you don't know if the child is approaching the targeted parent, whether it's for financial grabs or whether it's for, to torment them, because that's what some of them are being taught, to torment the targeted parent and lose empathy for them. And then you don't know if the child is actually, genuinely reaching out because they want to, have contact with you. We've got children who are being taught that the only way that they can have contact with the targeted parent is through conflict. What I found was the best way to, communicate with them is to avoid all this stuff, avoid these difficult discussions, and trying to not completely ignore, but it's just, I think there was a really good quote that I heard was Dr. Richard Warshak mentioned in one of his presentations was strike when the iron is cold. Not when they're like heated things, that when they're usually pliable, metal is usually pliable when it's heated, but with alienated children it's the opposite. They're more pliable when they're calm and that. So it's not assume that the child's contacting you for a money grab or to bully you. Is just to be open and non-reactive to it, and just hope that they can see you for who you are by the way you communicate, that you're loving and that you're kind and calm and things like that.
Absolutely. If the child is coming to you for a fight, don't give them a fight. Like, greet them with love and compassion. And then over time, hopefully your actions will speak louder than the words that they've heard about you. So then we looked at the adult alienated child's understanding of alienation post-reunification. And this was really interesting because a few things came up. One was the child's capacity to withhold blame for the alienation and this incredible capacity to say everyone has been hurt through this, even the alienating parent, because chances are they were traumatized from their own experience of alienation. So there was an incredible understanding of the intergenerational impacts of trauma and an incredible trauma-informed understanding post-reunification. There was also sympathy that they had for both parents that came from having that understanding of, well, my alienating parent has had this experience and that's an experience of trauma, and my targeted parent has also had this experience. And also an understanding that there is this lack of ideal parental relationships. So it's not black and white. It's not my alienating parent was perfect and the targeted parent was not, or vice versa. It's just people are complicated, people are flawed, and everybody in this family dynamic has been hurt in some way. Next slide. So then we looked at the reflections on the alienating parents' behaviours. There was a lot of shame and guilt that adult alienated children experienced around, I guess, misplaced shame and guilt on themselves for what the alienating parent did. Also shame and guilt for the things that they did in response to the alienating behaviours. But also what they found was the role of therapy was really important in dismantling their guilt and shame, in understanding their own trauma reactions and the trauma experiences of their family members. And so it seemed that finding a good mental health practitioner who can support you before reunification, during and after, can make a world of difference.
So I guess the psychoeducation side of things is really important too, is understanding all these dynamics and kind of learning what's bad behaviors and what's normal behaviors. Yeah, because often if these bad behaviors become your normal, when you're used to being on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, learning how to identify the red, yellow and green flags in relationships.
I think an important thing that I sort of worked out was understanding that, the part that the children do play in the alienation is things like, they're being interrogated for information and reporting back things to the alienating parent to appease them, and often giving in. And when you ask the same question all the time, if the parent's abusive or aggressive or bad parenting, and when it's being asked again and again, eventually kids will give in and tell that parent what they want to hear, and not realizing the ramifications of that. And often it's telling those half truths, that they actually did go swimming with the other parent, and but then they've come back and said, oh, they went swimming and the parent just sat there on their phone the whole time and didn't watch them, it was unsafe. So it's all those little twists that get added to these stories that these children unfortunately play a part in. And a lot of people don't understand that it can be the children actually going back and actually lying about situations. It's not always the alienating parent telling the lies. It's and you can understand when that information goes back to the alienating parent and what they do with it. That it can result in child protection or police or schools getting involved, or whatever the situation was, how it can just go from 0 to 100 and not realizing, the child doesn't realize what they've actually done unintentionally.
And also the child has to live with the grief and the pain of having rejected the targeted parent, and that can take time to unravel as well.
knowing that that was in response to or in reaction to alienating behaviours.
That's devastating, especially when you get a targeted parent who has become unwell or passes, it's something that it's very difficult to forgive yourself when you've played a part in not seeing them, that you've known that they've been suffering, even though you've had your own grief and suffering as an alienated child. You obviously do see what happens to the targeted parent, that they are suffering. It's hard to forgive yourself.
Absolutely. So then we looked at the targeted parent experience of reunification, and one of the important themes that came up in their interviews is, what is reunification? And it was really hard for some targeted parents to actually define at what point have they become reunified. And so it seems that although there may have been a catalyst event that initiated the first contact, then reunification is definitely a process that is that, approach, withdraw. And when you can say you now finally reunified is very subjective. And some parents said that they've been having on and off contact with their children for many years, even decades, and they still can't say that they have a continuous, close bond back with the child.
And the child might not want to be seen in public, with that parent. That's a big one, is that as you say, the ones that haven't, that have spent years sort of spending little bits of time here and there, but they still can't, have a birthday party or a Christmas and spend all time together. They're still withdrawn.
And then, of course, it's not just reunification between the child and the targeted parent. There's also reunification with extended family and close family friends, and that is a whole other process that takes time.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you've got friends and family who are, angered by the situation, and then they want to put their little bit in and not understand all these dynamics and how a child will withdraw completely, and cut them off again if somebody wants to push their version of events and things like that, or make them feel guilty for the way they've behaved. They might have seen SMSs the child has sent the parent, and so forth. And so this can be a huge hindrance.
Absolutely. Also, when the child makes that first contact with the targeted parent, it can also be very tempting for that parent to then want to get that child, who now might be an adult, and then take them to all of the family and friends that they haven't seen for a while. That could also be very overwhelming for the child. And so the child needs to have that time and that space to navigate their relationships with the other extended family members too.
Yeah, I think a really big one that I've seen is parents might not have seen their children for months or years, and all of a sudden they take a photo with them, and then next thing you know, it's up on Facebook and it's got the world view on there, or it's on Instagram or anything like that, and then next thing you know, the child's like, there's such an anxious feeling. I remember going through this myself with my kids, and every time we ever took a photo, they just said, "Oh, please don't put that on anyone." I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to," because I understood this sort of dynamic. So even though it's exciting for you, it's like, take it slowly, and ask the child, is it okay that I share this picture? And, you find most occasions they'll say no in the very beginning. It's something that we see all the time. And people get so excited about that rekindling again, and all of a sudden the child's pulled back for another, months or years again, because they don't want to be seen with that parent yet.
Sometimes I see grand announcements. My child has contacted me after so many years. I see that on social media, and the name of the parent making that announcement is there. That could also be really difficult for the child, because if that's then seen by certain family members,
who are engaged in using alienating behaviours, then those behaviours then might just amp up and the child is then unable to make contact with you again for a while.
Yeah. I think something that I actually experienced was when I did share a picture of my children and I, is that I had friends and family comment all over it about, oh my gosh, it's great to see you all together. And, you know, they'd started putting all these comments that sort of had alienation themes in it, you know, and some had made some really negative comments about the other parent. And I was like, oh, this is, and I just ended up, you know, deleting and taking the photo down, because I just thought this is just not right, especially having my children on the Facebook as well, you know, just trying to, you know, tread lightly with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think tread lightly is the best descriptor.
Mm.
So then for the targeted parents, they described the factors impacting reunification. And when they talked about the factors that hindered it, they also mentioned the ongoing influence of the alienating parent and alienating behaviours. They talked about their grief for other alienated children. So for some, there might be one child who's made contact, but the parent might still be alienated from other children. And their grief for those children can then impact on their capacity to be present with the child who's made the contact. Also, the child's mental health had a big impact. And so if the child is really unwell and not coping very well and really struggling with their trauma reactions, then that can make it difficult for the targeted parent to know how best to respond. And sometimes targeted parents are then trying to build a relationship with a child who has needs that are much greater than the targeted parent's capacity to be able to support. And so that can make it really difficult. And also just that ongoing impact of family law courts, the trauma that happens from being embroiled in a family law court, that also can have this ongoing influence and infiltrate relationships down the track. Did you want to add anything more to that, Amanda?
Yeah, I was just going to say, often we see parents have gone through great financial difficulties.
Mm.
And, you know, when they get their child back, sometimes they have these grand sense of entitlement towards the parent and then unable to afford certain lifestyles or things for the children. And it can be quite depressing, you know, especially when they do some of the financial splits have such a huge impact. When the alienating parents got 100% care, the percentages just really make it unfair for the targeted parent. And it's that, you know, you find sometimes people are having to be in shared accommodation or living back with family and things like that. So that does make it really difficult when you have your child reunify and you're not in a good place, you know, financially and mentally, you know. And also there's also some of the learned behaviours as well. You know, being some alienated kids externalize things and, you know, might have behaviours like slamming doors and yelling and things like that they've learned. So that's another challenge itself.
Mm. Yes, some children internalize their trauma and some children will externalize it and may come back to you very aggressive. That can be very difficult to build a relationship with a child who is so angry from their pain.
Yeah, on the so withdrawn as well. The high anxiety is just, it's really difficult to manage. Yeah, I've seen that before where the children would just completely shut down and disassociate. It's terrible. It's I guess that's why it's so important to be doing research in this area, is to see the impact that it has on them.
When we looked at the factors that helped reunification from the targeted parent's perspective, having support from others was really key, whether that be support from a mental health practitioner, support from support groups, support from your own supportive network was really helpful. and also meeting others who had reunified and hearing what their experience was, and learning, I guess, tips from parents who'd been through that experience was really key. But also, I think the really key part for the parents was starting afresh with the child. So not going into the past, not ruminating on past things, but just, we are here in the here and now. Let's just focus on the present and making this present moment as calm and as positive as it can be.
Being emotionally present and focus on having fun is a big one. And I often recommend that when people do reunify, especially ones that have decided to move in with them, is if you are able to, or if you can afford to, is have a little mini holiday, is just to, rekindle that relationship. Because it does definitely help. It distracts you from talking about the situation or what's just happened. I actually did that myself with my son. I did that, did a Canada trip, and we went away for 3 weeks, and it was the best. It was the best thing. Yeah, we're just like big kids going on holidays.
There's nothing more continuous and warm and inviting than going on a holiday with someone together.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, Amanda, that didn't happen at the first contact. That was a little down the track.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of other stuff we had to unpack first.
Yeah. You have to kind of build that trust first before the child can trust that going on a holiday with you is going to be a helpful thing.
Yeah, especially with the in the back of their mind, they sort of got that, they've been told that, your parent's going to abduct you. That common theme that I've heard, especially when it comes down to passports and stuff like that.
And then there's that ongoing influence of the family court as well. If there has been historically a lot of arguments about passports and who's holding them, is the family court going to hold them? Chances are the child was exposed to all of that adult content. And so then suddenly when they're an adult and it's like, we're going on a holiday overseas, it's like, oh, am I going to come back? Yeah. So then we looked at life after reunification, and Manny talked about the obvious positive impact of reunification and having children back in your life and building those relationships. And I guess, setting things right and having your amazing children back in your life. Some people talked about, we do not speak of the alienation. So for some, that's just a conversation that is never visited. It's done. It's over. We're not going to revisit that. We're now just talking about present and future. And then some talked about their mixed feelings towards the alienating parent. Some had some ongoing anger towards that parent. Some had a better appreciation of their trauma reactions and felt some level of empathy for that parent. But some also talked about the negative impacts of reunification. And as Amanda mentioned, financial impact is huge. Parental alienation itself has a huge financial impact for targeted parents, but also reunifying can be expensive because suddenly there's an extra person, and building that relationship might require some financial outlay. And then, of course, the targeted parents described that reunification rollercoaster as being very detrimental to their own mental health and finding that it can deteriorate over time, particularly if they didn't have the support that they needed.
Yeah, it's like feeling, I guess, that loss of identity as a parent, that loss of purpose in your life.
Yeah.
That's really hard, and it's like, often I hear parents say that they're all I live for, and that's like, well, that's where you still got to find other things in life that you enjoy. Think back to those times where you did do something that was fun and, try I go in that direction again and take part in your favorite hobbies and things like that. I think we cover that later on.
Yeah, we do. But yes, having other things to focus on in your life is really important, because then it helps you to heal.
I'm just reading the little quote there. It's part of having that, again, feeling like a mum again, or feeling like a dad again.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize, until you actually go through it yourself, what it's actually like. People just do not understand it unless you work in this place, like, this space like Mandy does, and does research in this area. There's a lot of people that just do not understand what it's like to be cut off from a parent or be cut off from your children.
Because it's not just the loss of that relationship, it's the loss of that identity, that loss of how can I be a parent, or that, and certainly for the child, there's a really complex loss of identity in there when it becomes enmeshed with the alienating parent. And there's also the loss of the hopes and dreams in the future that you thought you were going to have. So it's complex, many layers of disenfranchised grief or ambiguous loss.
And time that you'll never get back ever again.
Exactly. So then we looked at all of the information that we received from the participants, and then when we looked at other research in this area, we then provided some, I guess, ideas for preparing for reunification. And I think the key, as we've already talked about, is just be aware that both the child and the targeted parent are going to have complex trauma reactions, and that can get in the way of rebuilding the relationship or building the relationship as it is in that moment. So it's really important for the child and the parent to have strategies to manage their trauma reactions. And that might mean seeing a mental health practitioner who is knowledgeable in helping them to navigate those. Then there are also making sure that both the child and the parent have a good toolkit of coping resources, because you're going to need it to ride this roller coaster. And then there's also the alienated child's capacity to put in place boundaries. If it's not something that comes naturally to the child, it's not something that's being taught to them. And so that might become the targeted parent's role to teach them about healthy boundaries. Did you want to talk more about that, Amanda?
I should remember doing that with my own kids. I said to them, if there's ever we start talking about things that might make you feel uncomfortable, whether it's associated to or anything like that, I said, just say to me, Mum, can we not talk about that because it's quite upsetting, or, I don't think this is something that we should talk about. I said, I want you to be able to speak up and tell me this. I said, because I have a lot of hurts and you have a lot of hurts, and it's best to let us heal for a while before we start uncovering all these hurts, But you'll find over time that even though you do have this, this pain that you feel about what's happened, spending that time rekindling your relationship and having fun with them and things like that, you don't have so much pain towards the end, and you find that they just sort of drift away, and then your focus is just the here and now and forward. But the other thing was that boundaries are also essential with other friends and family. I had to, bring up with people that would go to a barbecue for, and I'd say, look, before we go, could you please not bring up things to do with the past, to do with their, the other parent and things like that. And so it was good to give people a heads up, because you always find there's always that one that wants to have that conversation, or who doesn't understand it, who can be quite judgmental and things like that. So it was, I think alienated children and targeted parents need to be well armed with boundaries.
Definitely. And just to come back to something that we talked about earlier, sometimes a child makes contact with you not to rebuild the relationship, but because they want something like money or what have you. That's when, as a targeted parent, you need to decide what you're prepared to give. And also think about, do you want your relationship with your child to be conditional on how much money you can give or how much stuff you can give? And so it's okay to put in place boundaries and say, I know that you want X amount of dollars from me, but I can't give that to you at this time. And that's modeling healthy boundaries of no to the child and setting the foundation for a relationship that's not conditional on stuff. So I guess the take-home messages are: be prepared for the approach withdrawal cycle, and that can be a short cycle and it could be a very long cycle, but slow and steady does win the race. Really importantly, this process, reunification, is a process and it needs to be driven by the child. So if you get in the child's face, you will initiate a withdrawal cycle. So being patient, avoiding very emotive language, having healthy boundaries for yourself, teaching healthy boundaries to your child, and both are going to need a lot of self-care in this time. Do you want to add more, Amanda?
I was going to say, when we say it's, driven by the child, thing is the targeted parent needs to be approachable. That's the big one that we sort of will go on to in the next couple of slides, is that space that we create for the child to return to.
Absolutely.
They are driven.
Yeah, reunification can't happen until the child is ready, and that readiness needs to be greeted with openness from the targeted parent. So Amanda, would you like to talk about free space? Because this is really important.
Yeah, this is a place that you create for your children to return to, or to, peek into on social media and things like that. So there's no emotional pressure. You're understanding that they've already been under pressure through this whole ordeal, and there's no guilt or shame. As we've explained before, there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with alienation. So it's important not to bring up things of the past, and they can connect in peace. That there's not going to be that conflict, that they can see you for who you are, and show that you're that parent that you've always been, upbeat and happy, and there for them. And a big one was they can think and feel for themselves. I found that when I had both my children come back, is that they were not thinking and feeling for themselves. So I started to ask them how they felt about things, not about the situation, but anything, after we watched a movie, or whether it was about what they like or anything like that, just actually getting them into that habit of actually thinking and deciding what they like, because often things have been chosen for them, or they've been told what to think or how to behave and things like that. So I think that was really important, to make sure that you encourage them, that they're heard, and that they can speak up. But sometimes you can actually find that some of the kids don't even know what to, when to have their showers or when to eat, because everything's been in such control that they can't even decide what they want to have for breakfast, and it sounds kind of extreme, but this is what we're dealing with. And healthy boundaries are respected. So as I said before, is when you're teaching your children to say it's okay, that, that you don't want to talk about this, is that you respect it. You don't go, oh, but I just want to tell you a little bit because this is really, really important. You basically go, okay, yeah, and then move on to something else, or, step away and do something else to distract yourself if you've got to get yourself calmed down about something. And the big one is free to love both parents, because sometimes we see children reunify and all of a sudden they become alienated from the other parent. And obviously there are some parents, alienating parents, who it just doesn't stop, or it's relentless, it gets a lot worse. but the child still needs to be free, you know, to love them and be loved unconditionally. You know, both goes both ways. And as we've been saying, the focus is forward and not on the difficult past. I mean, I guess your thoughts make you feel, so choose the good thoughts. You know, I think that's really important. If it's you bring up a certain topic is going to be upsetting for you and your child, don't go there. Think about something really nice and talk about something that's constructive.
Absolutely. And then there's free space.
Free space online. I guess this is on online one. So yeah, speaking with love and kindness. So all your messages are always positive. I find it's good to keep up to date with, like, if you haven't been in touch with your children for a long time when they're in that adolescent stage, is go and read about like how to communicate with like teenagers and things like that, you know, or how to create conversations that are engaging and that are child focused and stuff like that. Because I know that I felt really out of touch because it was 8 years without my daughter and almost 6 years without my son. And so I missed all those years. So I had no idea how to, you know, communicate with, you know, adolescents. So yeah, remaining calm always, even though they might come across really aggressive or money grabs and things like that, you know, learn how to be assertive. There's some great resources out there that we often share in our research and resources lists on how to be assertive, and be mindful of the frequency and intensity of communication. Parents often get so excited and all of a sudden they've got this message just going back and forward, and they forget that the child's probably going to be under the watch of the other parent. And then all of a sudden you might find that they might say something really mean or rude to you to get you to stop because they've, you know, got overwhelmed, and the other parent's obviously seeing these noises on, or the notifications on the phone. So just be careful. It's kind of trying to find those times where you can have that, I call it like secret contact or hidden love. You sometimes have to do that in the very beginning, is keep it hidden until they can form that trust and actually spend some time with you and see you for who you are. But it's also important to ask them, if you can, like, is it okay that I send you a message at this time of the day? You know, you can find out which are the best times. You know, sometimes they'll let you know, like they might be on their way from school from this time to this time, you know, and the parent's not around. So they might be able to give you a time slot where it's okay. And expect crumbs in communication. It's amazing that crumb can just fill you so much, you know, when you receive this little, sometimes people get like a little love heart on the message and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, it's huge for someone who's a targeted parent, you know, or targeted grandparent, you know, when you haven't had communications in a long time. An important one is no response is not always a bad thing. People give up sometimes when they haven't had any response from their child, and not taking into consideration that there might have been somebody, you know, standing over them. It might not have been the right time. They could feel guilty because they haven't contacted you in so long, and they might not know how to handle the situation, not know what to say as well. And sometimes they're worried about the parent seeing the communications on their phone, like checking their devices regularly and stuff like that. So some kids will actually delete the incoming messages, so it looks like there's been no contact, or they might even delete their own outgoing messages and stuff like that. So yeah, it's important to keep in contact and show that your children are interested in them. That was, I guess, when you're looking up things about adolescence, find out, you know, what kids are interested in at their age, you know. And the big one was the conversation. That was
that's when the child might want to have the conversation with you that's like, what happened from your point of view? And it might be, you tell me the whole story from your point of view, or you tell me about some very specific thing or event that happened. I want to hear your version. I think tread carefully. Only have that conversation or the conversation when the child initiates it. And if you're going to answer that, make sure you do so in a really caring, compassionate manner that doesn't denigrate anybody, particularly the other parent, and that is done in a child-centered way, so that the child can just sort of hear the facts of your perspective, and also reiterate that, you know, 3 people can have one experience but have 3 different recollections of what occurred, because everybody's different and everybody views the different the one experience through their own individual lenses.
Yeah, and it's like people often say, oh, this is the truth, but you know, sometimes you only get a snippet of that.
Yeah.
Truth. So it's just being mindful of, don't open the floodgates. I think that's a big one. Just don't open those floodgates, even though some parents do, and they go, oh my gosh, this is the message that I've sent, and I'm just being like really cringe. I'm like, okay, you've done this. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's okay to apologize and say, look, I'm sorry for the things that I've said. You know, I know this would have been really upsetting, you know, and try not to, beat yourself up, because there's no specific manual for this. We
No.
information to help people.
And, you know, we're talking about humans who've had very traumatic experiences. Now, this is free space online.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, alienated children will observe, block and unblock the targeted parent on social media. I've heard this from speaking with a number of alienated children, is that they would sometimes go in from their friends' devices and go in and have a look at the targeted parent, or they would unblock and block themselves, you know, from the targeted parent, and also other family members as well. So it's important that, be really mindful of what you do share on your feed on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook. It's always good to share upbeat things that you know, whether it's, even if it's an article or a video or something like that, that could be inspirational for your child. Or if you're able to, is share some photos. You know, often people are afraid to share photos in case the other parent will see them or use them or whatever. Obviously, you've got to do what's comfortable for you, but I don't always recommend to have a complete blackout of your profile if you have the goal to, you know, try and rekindle and reunify with your child. You know, it's good for them to actually see you, you know, see that you're well, and see that you know, are doing active things and stuff like that. And your digital footprints and social media feeds, you just got to make them really, really inviting, you know, because it's really heavy content. We see a lot of people get into these groups that are kind of like the angry parent groups, and they get quite activist-like, and it's because they're so frustrated and they feel so helpless and they want to be heard. But then you kind of lose focus of what you're trying to achieve. Like if you want to reunify with your child, you know, your child's going to go, oh my gosh, this person's so angry and they're so activist, like, you know, it's kind of solidifying what the other parent's saying about them, that they're an angry person. So you want to do the complete opposite of that and portray yourself in a positive light, and maintain a presence that is authentic. You don't want to be too over the top, like over positive, because over positive can sometimes be toxic over positive too.
Definitely. So for targeted parents, it's essential that you engage in good self-care practices that could include healthy eating. You need to fuel your body and fuel your mind. Practice mindfulness can be really helpful in helping to calm down the nervous system. We know that regular exercise is great for the mind and the body. We also know that spending time in nature is fantastic for your well-being. Keep socially connected with the right supportive people. Keep visible to your child so that they know where to find you and how to find you. And really, really importantly, keep living your life and never give up. We know that the suicide rate for targeted parents is very high, but if you're not here, your child can't connect with you. So you need to be here for them. You need to be here and ready for them for when they make contact.
It's with the keep living your life. Often alienated children feel really guilty when they're seeing their targeted parents suffering and no longer getting out and doing anything, and cutting off from all social supports and that. So it is important. And then there's a flip side of that. People go, oh, well, they don't care anymore. They're off doing this. You know, they're going on holidays. They're doing all sorts of stuff. But the thing is, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, you're still going to get criticized for everything that you do, usually when you're a targeted parent by the other parent. So you might as well keep living your life and actually enjoying yourself. So find things that you, I always say, like hobbies and crafts, or, men's social groups or women's social groups, or, there's a lot of great things. Try and subscribe. If it's online stuff, subscribe to positive stuff. Try not to spend too much time in the forums, alienation forums, reading everybody's stories and engaging in all those conversations. Take time out, have some boundaries, social media boundaries. Important, because otherwise you spend that fight all the time.
Absolutely. You need to be healthy and well for the day that your child makes contact with you. And similarly for the children, it's essential for the adolescents or the adult alienated children to engage in good self-care practices for all the same reasons as parents: healthy eating, mindfulness, regular exercise, nature. Find a good mental health practitioner who has an understanding of alienating dynamics, and really take care of yourself, because your experience is one of trauma, and healing from that is really important. And keep living your life, because we do know also for adult alienated children or even adolescents, the suicide rate is very high. Keep living and never give up, because on the other side of this might actually be a really great, fulfilling life.
I think that was what was picked up in the research is the post-traumatic growth.
Absolutely.
Great section.
Yes, more research to come on that one. If you would like more information, you can go to the Eeny, Meeny, Miney, Mo Foundation website, www.emm.org.au. And we will finish on this last slide.